Hi, everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Very glad on this episode to be talking with comics creator Eric Shanower. Thank you so much, Eric, for jumping in and talking with me for a few minutes. I know you have a long history in comics, so this could be an extensive conversation, but I promised you something brief as well. Um, so thanks for jumping on and joining.
Oh, you're welcome, Jason. Thanks. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for saying yes. And as I said, I know you have a long history that goes back to Dark Horse Presents and Nexus and other such work. You have an impressive list of works. So curious about what it was that drew you into comics initially.
Well, it's hard for me to remember because I started reading comics when I was very young. Uh, when I was about 5 years old, I had a subscription to a magazine called Children's Digest, and
Hmm.
they serialized the adventures of Tintin in this magazine, and that was, other than newspaper strips, that was the first comics I can remember reading, and I really loved it. I still love Tintin by Hergé.
Yeah, yeah.
After that, I don't know, the first comic book I ever bought was an issue of Casper from a 7-Eleven.
Hmm.
I I'm I had read some friends' comics, and I was aware of comic books, but I don't know why after reading this friend's comics, I felt like, oh, I need one of these of my own.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
asked my dad in particular, can you please take me to somewhere to buy a comic book? So that's why we went to 7-Eleven and I bought an issue of Casper. After that, it was all downhill. I'm just Comics was something I had a great enthusiasm for all my life. When I was in high school, I decided I wanted to become a cartoonist professionally. I had been drawing my own comics for years by that point, and so that's what I did. Became a professional cartoonist.
Love it, love it. And you've since worked in Casper. You've worked on some Casper
I
titles, I believe.
have drawn Casper and Hot
Yeah.
Stuff and Spooky and Wendy and all the magical Harvey Comics characters that lasted a couple of years. That was really fun. I
Hmm.
it, as far as scratching an itch to draw these characters that had been my favorites for a period of time when I was a child. It was also just fun drawing those characters in because they're very exaggerated, and just drawing the shapes and the forms was really fun.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask about that attraction to fantasy and to sort of the magical elements because I also know you for Age of Bronze, of course, and the Oz books. You have a pantheon of Oz books with Marvel. So curious about what draws you to that genre in particular of fantasy.
Well, it's hard for me to explain what draws me to fantasy. I don't really know. Uh, I have to say, though, that Age of Bronze is not fantasy. There is no magic in
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
whatsoever. I have actually removed any fantasy element from my retelling of the story of the Trojan War, so the gods do not interact with mortals. Uh, but yes, of course, I have been writing and drawing Oz comics and other projects my since I was a child, because I fell in love with L. Frank Baum's Oz books when I was 6 years old,
Hmm.
and I don't know what drew me to them. Well, I mean, seeing the MGM movie with Judy Garland on television is what first introduced me to The Wizard of Oz. But then when I saw that there were books in the bookstore, I was like, oh, I have to have these.
Hmm. Hmm.
The illustrator of most of L. Frank Baum's Oz series was named John R. Neal. Uh, the his illustrations in the Oz books, I'm sure, are what attracted me to wanting to read those books when I saw them.
Yeah.
Uh, the edition of The Road to Oz, which is the fifth Oz book, uh, at the when I saw it in the store, that edition, this was 1969 or 1970, had one of John R. Neal's most detailed, lovely drawings on the cover. And so, even though there were several Oz books in the bookstore, and I could pick one of them, uh, that's the one I picked, the one with the really beautiful John R. Neal illustration on the cover. So I don't remember at the time thinking, oh, this is the one I want because of this drawing. But I just feel like whether it was conscious or subconscious back then, that's sort of why I picked that. So that definitely was part of my draw to the Oz books.
Mm-hmm.
I like children's fantasy, uh, mostly classic children's fantasy. Uh, and I don't know why, I don't know what draws me to it, why I prefer that over other genres of stories, but I do. Part of it's just the unexpected adventure aspects. Strange things happen in fantasy books that
Mm-hmm.
couldn't happen in the real world, and that's, I guess, on some level, I find that really, really attractive.
Yeah, yeah. Same here as a reader, and um, I'm always surprised by how folks are not aware of kind of the unfolding story that L. Frank Baum had with those books, because most people seem to be familiar with Wizard of Oz, but there's the entire series to explore and to dig into.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of Oz books.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so curious about whether it be Oz or Age of Bronze and digging into the Trojan War, what it's like for you to go through that process of world building for your books.
Well, it starts with story, I guess. That's what the plot and the characters, whether I'm reading something or whether I am creating a story.
Hmm.
It starts with the plot and characters. World building comes at this as a service to those aspects. Um, so yeah, I have to figure out what the world is like to serve the idea for the story that I have.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, there's a story that I've been working on for about 15 years, which is not published yet. Uh, and I'm trying to think of that as an example. So, I mean, I came up with the idea for the story first, what was going to happen, uh, wrote the story, and then in subsequent drafts had to revise the way the world works because it is a story about two kids from our world going into a fantasy world.
Hmm.
And I had to make sure, I mean, I wrote a whole bunch of stuff about this fantasy world, but when I started getting farther into the story, I realized this is not quite working. So I had to revise a lot of stuff. So that's the way I build fantasy worlds. It's sort of just throw whatever works at the moment and then have to go back and revise to make it all work. I do not plan the world ahead of time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Always fascinated with the process because I know there are people that kind of like detail the entire map, and then there are people that do part of it and then kind of catch it as they go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess as far as world building goes, and it is an important part of any story to me to make sure all the details are consistent and the actual world works within the context of the story. That is an important part. So it's not like I just it's a secondary step in my process, but it is not a secondary consideration.
Hmm. Hmm.
Although, every once in a while it's like, oh, that's just hand wave that.
Right, right. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fantasy. You can get away with that sometimes.
This is true. This is
It
true.
depends.
You can
Depends.
strain believability at times. Yeah. So curious about what's next in the creative journey and where readers can go to learn more. I know that you have a website we should probably mention. And as I said, you have a very impressive list of work that you've done over the years.
Well, The website I want to point everyone to is age-of-bronze.com.
Mhm, mhm.
That you can get to my blog from there. It has I don't update I don't update news as often as I should. So what am I working on now? Well, I have a secret project right now that I can't talk about it because it hasn't been announced yet. Um, it is working with a classic literary property
Mhm,
um,
mhm.
that is incredibly famous, but no one would probably expect me to be working on it. But I'm drawing it. I'm not writing it. I was asked by the writer if I'd be interested, and so I'm doing that. Uh, I have two short stories, prose stories, not comic stories, horror anthologies. Well, one is a horror anthology, but they're both horror stories. Uh, Coming out soon. In October, the anthology, The Cozy Cosmic, will be released by Underland Press, and
Mhm.
I have a story in that. And then in November or thereabouts, the anthology, The Winding Path, which is an anthology of games stories, will be released from Demagogue Press, and I have a short story in that. I am still in the process of working with John Dallaire, who's the colorist for Age of Bronze.
Mhm.
We're coloring the fourth graphic novel, so that'll be out whenever that is done. The first three are currently available. The first three Age of Bronze volumes in
Mhm.
color,
Mhm.
from Image Comics, and we have the fourth one to do. And I am still working on Age of Bronze. I assure you, even though it's been quite a while since any uh, new material was out, but I will be getting back to that more full time within the next couple of weeks, actually. Uh, the other thing that I'd like to talk about is I just had a book published. It came out at the end of July. It's called All Wound Up: The Making of the TikTok Man of Oz.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's the history of a stage musical from 1913. This musical was written by L. Frank Baum, the author of the Oz books, and composed by Louis F. Gottschalk. It was on stage, was produced in 1913, starting in Los Angeles by Oliver Morosco, who was a major stage producer of the time. And I actually produced a revival of this show at an Oz convention about 10 years ago.
Love it.
And since then, uh, I had to abridge the script because it was too long with all the songs in, and one of the reasons I had to put all the songs in. That was one of the stipulations of the convention organizers because he wanted all the songs performed. So, but there were all the songs that still exist from this show were never all in the same production because songs would come in and go out and come in and go out and
Mhm.
switch
Mhm.
around to different characters. But I had to put in all the music. So that made the show really, really long. So I had to abridge the script. Anyway, I did a version of the script, which is basically just Baum's words cut down so that only the funny parts are
Mhm.
still in.
Mhm.
Um, but I wanted to publish this script and score so that other groups could actually do it. So it's been about 10 years. At the same time, I thought, well, I should do a history of the show too. The history of the show is what took a really long time. Anyway, it's out now. It's published by Hungry Tiger Press,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I'm actually pretty proud of it because I'm not generally a nonfiction writer. Uh, I'm not someone. I mean, I do a lot of research for a lot of my projects. The Trojan War continues to be a major research project.
Mhm.
Uh, Although not so much anymore since I've covered so many of the sources and the archaeology of the Trojan War for my comic series Age of Bronze. Uh, but I had to do The research for the TikTok Man of Oz musical was different in that I had to make sure all my sources were absolutely correct, and I had to record those sources for the endnotes to make sure that every bit of information that I presented was actually correct,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
which I don't have to do if I'm writing a fiction thing. I just do all the research and then do whatever I want with it, which is what I
Right.
do with Age of Bronze. Uh, anyway, that's what I did. So I hope that the book presents the information on this show in a understandable and factual manner.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's fascinating to listen about the process, and I love the range of what you do as well. I love how you're continuing to try out different ways of storytelling and going through the process of sharing about things that it sounds like you love.
Well, I've had to, in the past few years, the comics market has not been the same as it used to be.
Hmm.
Uh, and I hear a lot of other cartoonists complaining about page rates are going down. It's harder to find work, and that's been my experience too. So, although I have a series that is ongoing and it's uh, it's my main project, I still have to think about, well, where's my career going to be going?
Hmm. Hmm.
And doing a little bit of diversification doesn't hurt. I mean, diversified portfolio is stronger than investing only in one stock.
Absolutely, absolutely, and really enjoy Age of Bronze and looking forward to what is to come with it as well. And I enjoy what's already being created.
Thank you. I'm
Hmm.
looking forward for what's to come too, because the issue that I'm working on now is really exciting. Um, I want to talk about it, but I probably shouldn't because
Well,
I'll dissipate my energy, right? So
yeah.
uh, the
Well,
previous issue I really liked it too. That meeting, I don't know. I can just talk. The meeting of Achilles and Helen on the top of Mount Ida, which is a much little known episode of the Trojan War, but it's been there since for thousands of years. And there's just these certain scenes in the story of the Trojan War I've just always been looking forward to ever since I got the idea from the beginning, and that was one of them. And I felt like, oh, this is a really powerful scene. I have to do it justice. I thought I did. I don't know whether I did or not. I didn't get a lot of reaction on it, so maybe I think a lot of people are just waiting for the graphic novel collection and not reading individual issues.
yeah,
And
yeah.
uh, Image has stopped publishing print issues anyway. They're just digital anyway until we get to the collections, and then they will be in print.
Mhm.
And everything's color now.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So sounds like good things to look forward to, and I should probably let you get back to the issue since you are in the zone and passionate about getting it out there. And yeah, love that when you have a vision in mind and you get to go through the turns in the story that you want to tell. So looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you, Jason.